Okay, the section we have is Chapter 6. It's called Gathering and Using Supporting Material. By the end of the chapter, that you're going to be able to list 5 potential sources of supporting materials for a speech, explain 5 strategies for a logical research process, list and describe 6 types of supporting material, list and explain 6 criteria for determining the best supporting material to use in a speech. The topics that we're going to be addressing is sources of supporting materials, research strategies, and the types of supporting material. Okay, when giving a speech you're particularly interested in, you may find that you are your own best source. Using personal knowledge and experience, you will help raise your credibility with your audience. If you have to give a speech on a topic you're unfamiliar with, you can use outside sources such as the internet, online, where you can find online databases. You could also use the library, or you could set up an interview with a person who has personal knowledge about the topic. When conducting the interview, you should dress appropriately. Take an extra pen or pencil for notes if you have to, even if you're recording the interview, and you should always arrive a few minutes earlier.
When you're first starting your speech, one thing you might want to do is make a preliminary bibliography. This is a list of all the promising resources that you've found so far. Question some people might have is, how many resources should I have? For, say, example, a 10-minute speech, about 10 to 12 would be a reasonable number. Any more, and you won't have enough. Any more, and you might get overwhelmed by all the information. Any less than that, and you won't have enough. As you're writing your speech, you want to keep all your resources on hand in case you need to go back and reference them. For web pages, you can bookmark them in your web browser, or print out the pages from if you find any information in an online database, or you can actually physically copy down the information from a index or catalog. Establishing a consistent format for your bibliography can help you easily find and cite the page number, title, publisher, or other vital information about your source. The 2 most common formats for bibliographies are MLA and APA. If you're using a book as a source of information, you'll need to write down the author's name, title, publisher, the date of publication, and the library's call number for the book, if possible. If you're using an article, you'll also need the author's name, the article title, the periodical title that the article came from, the date of publication, and the page numbers that the article's on in the publication. If you're using any other kind of print sources, you'll need the author's name, title, publisher, date, and page number, just kind of like as a general rule. When compiling your sources, you'll want to determine how useful they'll be. You need to think critically about how they'll help you achieve your purpose and how effective they'll be with your audience. Once you've got all your sources together, you'll want to take notes and record any examples, opinions, statistics, or any other information that might be relevant to your speech. You probably want to carry note cards with you, in case you hear a fact on the news or radio that has relevance to your speech. Using 3x5 note cards can give you the greatest flexibility when copying down your source information. And the last thing that you want to do is, when you're doing your research, if you come across any picture or diagram, you want to look for possible presentation aids to help you later on, and bookmark it so you can go back to it and find it easily.
Many of you, I'm sure, have to prepare to give a speech, and part of preparation for your speech is finding supporting details, supporting material. I'll be going through 6 different types of supporting details, including illustration, description and explanation, definition, analogy, statistics, opinions, These are all types of supporting material, and I will be explaining how to effectively use them. The first type of supporting material I'll be going over is illustrations. Now there's 3 types of illustrations. You have brief illustration, long illustration, and hypothetical illustration. When using brief illustration, what you're looking to do is tell a story using 1 to 2 sentences. And normally when you're using brief illustration, you're trying to use a number of them to express a point or just support your information. Followed by the extended illustration. Now this one's a little bit more longer, and the purpose of this is to bring out the emotion of your listener, to really stir some things up. And the last type is the hypothetical illustration. Now this is a bogus story. This is just meant to either get a reaction or get some type of question or a point across to your listener. Now part of using these illustrations effectively is that you're going to try to find what suits your speech the best, what makes your speech more supportive. The following type of supporting material is description and explanation. Now, the first one is describing. When you're describing in your speech, you want to use vivid details, things to really paint a picture in your audience mind. Followed by the explaining how. When explaining how, you want to go as much into detail as possible without overdoing it. And then explaining why. Same thing. The whole point of the explanation as far as supporting material is to provide a more detailed, a more clearly presented view of your point so that it can describe how a thing either exists or has existed in the past. And using description and explanation effectively, you just got to make sure to keep it brief, use specific language, and try not to overdo it. The following type of supporting detail is definitions. Now, there's only 2 justifiable reasons why you should be using definition. One is to describe different terms and different technical words that you might use in your speech that need to be identified. So aside from definition by classification, which is just putting a term into groups or defining them, you got operational definition, which is gonna describe either a thing or an operation or even a technical term. And this is all relevant to your speech that is specific information. Using definitions effectively, only use definitions when they're absolutely needed. Make sure that when you're defining something is understandable, and make sure that your definition remains consistent throughout the whole speech. The following type of supportive material is analogies. Now, there's 2 different types of analogies. You have literal analogies, which is mostly used for compare and contrast, and then you got figurative analogies, which is mostly used just to compare. In the using of your analogies effectively, just make sure that the 2 things being compared are similar, and in the figurative analogy as well, there must be some type of similarity to relate your story back to your speech and your topic. The following supportive material is statistics. Now, using statistics is mostly going to be used to show percentages, show different types of just numbers or charts during your presentation. Now, to use statistics effectively, you must make sure that the resources is reliable, followed by the fact that wherever these sources are coming from, there has to be some type of authority behind it. There is a difference between the primary source and the secondary source. The primary source is from the original collector of data and is being interpreted. Your secondary source has already been reported and you're just receiving the results. You have to try to use unbiased resources. That way you can make sure that when your speech is delivered effectively. There is no opinions, it's all facts. And make sure to interpret your statistics effectively. When you're presenting it, not everyone can read and understand what has been put up on display or on PowerPoint. So that is when you come in to interpret those facts and those different types. Last but not least, make sure that they are memorable. So you must try to round off any type of numbers. Make sure that the visual aids are clear and presented and attractive to the viewers. The following supporting material is opinions. Now, three different types of opinions. You have the expert opinion, the lay testimony, and literary quotations. Expert opinion is going to be based on a reliable resource, a person of authority, in other words. And at that point, it could be, for example, if you're taking a survey on the National Cancer Association, you'll be talking to one of the doctors or a head person in charge of the actual association. That is an expert testimony, an expert opinion. The next one is a lay testimony. Now, the lay testimony is mostly used to stir up the audience emotions. You tell a story about some type of tragedy or a mother with children on the streets, and all that's supposed to provoke some type of action or whatever it is your speech is directing towards. Now, how to use your opinions effectively. Be certain that the authority you cite is an expert on the subject of the discussion, and identify your sources. Cite unbiased authorities. Cite opinions that are representative in prevailing opinions. Quote your sources accurately, and use literary quotations sparingly. Now, last but not least, the best supporting material. Now, first things first, bigger is always better. The more statistics, the more stories, illustrations, explanations, definitions that you can use, the better. The more you remove your opinion out of the speech and just insert more facts, the more your point will get across and the more convincing your speech will be. The following thing is proximity. You got to make sure that your statistics are close to what you're looking for as far as results, is relevant to the listeners, and is something that they can relate to. Concreteness. You got to make sure that your facts, whatever it is something that has specific statistics, specific details, something that is stable, believable. A variety, using all 6 different types of supporting materials, from definitions, explanations, quotes, stories, illustrations. Humor is a big one. Making your audience laugh, it draws them in again, it keeps them attentive, it keeps them engaged to your speech. And last but not least, suitability. Your stats, your stories, whatever it is that you're using as your supporting material must be relevant to your speech. Otherwise, it will just confuse your audience, confuse whatever it is you're trying to get across, and ultimately you will fail at your point for your speech.